Hi everyone, this is Nick with the Western New York Drupal user group, and what you're about to see here is one of our recent meetups with the very talented, multifaceted Chris Luckhart, who visited us from Toronto. If you're interested in meetups like this and you reside in the Western New York area, that's Buffalo, Rochester, or any of the surrounding areas, you can check us out on WNYDUG.org, that's WNYDUG.org, or of course on groups.drupal.org. Hope to see you at our next meetup. We have them monthly as well as a virtual meetup in the middle of every month as well. Enjoy!
Coming out soon. See? Nice segue. Yeah. It's almost like I planned that, but I didn't, unfortunately. Okay. So, I don't like to use slides too much. I have a few here, but I'll be jumping back and forth between presentation, like actual live demonstrations and presentation. So I'm kind of cut off on the screen. Is that going to matter much?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah? Okay. Well, I guess we all know the new Drupal 8 logo. Oh, or if you don't, it kind of has a little thing on top of it that looks like the Drupal 8, the Drupal logo. So the Drupal
Crew cut.
Crew cut, yeah, yeah. This represents how close we are to a release. The part you can't see is how far we've come. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
Ew. Oh.
It's not 7, come on.
Can we trim that part? Yeah. Okay, so anyway, I'm here to talk about Drupal 8. This is a high-level overview of Drupal 8. So some of us are obviously kind of knee-deep in the trenches with 8, and I have some questions to ask you later, sir. But yeah, so I'm just going to go over a high-level introduction to Drupal 8, and we'll take it from there. So, who am I? This is me, Chris Luckhart. I've been working with Drupal for a long time. I'd like to do site building, theming, development, et cetera, all those sort of things. I'm fairly big on doing community development. I was actually, I mentioned maybe before the recording started that I was over in Japan. I was actually working with their user group over there and helping them with some community building ideas and things, because they are kind of at the stage now where Toronto at least was at in, say, 2007 or 2008. Got a small group. They're just starting to get some legs in the Drupal user base there. Companies are starting to pick up on the idea of using open source instead of large proprietary bundles of software and that sort of thing. So, and I helped them with their Drupal camp last year, and I've spoken at another meetup. It was actually in Osaka again about a year ago too. So I like to do a lot of community building, and I like talking about Drupal around the world, I guess. Yeah, so there's my actual live page, slightly updated, but yeah, it talks about areas of expertise and different things. I do a lot of project management these days too, which is kind of fun. But I recently built a team of Drupal guys together to work on a project which actually it just launched. So no, I probably can't do this because it's recording. I'll have to wait. I'll mention it after we're done recording. NDAs. I may not be in my own country, but I got to be careful anyway. So maybe I can talk about that a little bit later. I was recently very fortunate and very honored to be featured by the Drupal Association as their Drupal Master Profile. They're doing a persona series, and they found some people in the community to talk about for these different personas that they're working on. Does anybody know about this? Yeah? Okay, great. So yeah, I am a Drupal master, bow before me, I guess. I don't know. All it means is I get to use any kind of clout that comes from this to help our community in Toronto, which is great, because this would never happen without our community. And especially with, and I like to get a chance to, where is it? James Walker, there he is. Does anybody know James Walker? So he founded our Toronto group, and he was at, I believe he was at the very first DrupalCon, which is like 5 guys in a circle at OSCon Vancouver, I think. And he was also one of the early Lullabots, and now he's just doing his own freelance stuff and working on fairly large projects. Of course, nothing I can talk about here, but yeah, he's listed as a mentor on my Drupal.org page, and also Khaled from Kitchener-Waterloo. He was those two were very instrumental in my early development with Drupal, and so you can either credit them or blame them, one or the other. But yeah, huge shout out to James for starting this snowball back in 2008. Anyway, this is not about me. This is about Drupal 8, so we'll get right into it. Okay. So Drupal 8. First branch was created by Dries. Everyone knows who Dries is, right? Yeah. Interestingly, that's a question that is worth asking depending on who I'm talking to. But yeah, so Dries, he created the first branch at DrupalCon Chicago in March 2011. And what that really meant is he created the branch and no work was done for at least 6 months. But part of the Drupal 8 project was, the size of Drupal is big, right? It isn't this little hobbyist project that he put together in his bedroom or living room way back 14 years ago now. So wisely, the project was divided into different initiatives. But based on some key goals, those initiatives were created. So the key goals were improving the user experience of Drupal. There were studies done, I believe University of Minnesota was one of the prime studies, and they talked about the usability of Drupal 6, Drupal 7, and where things can be improved and that sort of thing. Improving the user experience, separating content and configuration, web services integration, and multi-device capability. So we all know in 2011, getting Drupal to work on one of these was not a great experience. Most people just gave up and said, just do desktop only. I don't know, but anyway, multi-device capability, not just phones, but crazy things like refrigerators and whatnot down the road. So, like I mentioned, it was divided into 6 initiatives, and I'll show all 6 on the screen there. And if you're good at math, you'll notice there's 7. So the initiatives that we have are essentially configuration management, web services, or WSGI, as it's called, design, multilingual, HTML5, and mobile. Layouts was an initiative, but it proved to be too big to tackle. The easy way to explain it is penalizing Drupal's admin interface. So I put Drupal 9 up there. There's been some talk about trying to do it in a point release of Drupal 8, but let's just say 9 to play it safe. And maybe we could talk about the release cycle that's being talked about too later on. So those are the initiatives, but I'm not going to talk about the initiatives one by one. What I'll talk about are sort of 4 categories of the initiatives being targeted towards. So essentially it's content authors and mobile platforms, site builders, designers and themers, and developers. You can kind of break Drupal into those 4 categories at a high level. There's a bit of a blend with the first one, but I'll get to that in a second. So I'm going to talk about content authors first because the main people using Drupal are not the people developing or designing or theming or whatnot or site building or even project managing, which I suppose is a category in its own right. But really, it's the content authors, the people who are in there adding content every day, managing the content, and dealing with that on different sets of devices. So if they have a bad experience or a not so good experience, let's say, word will spread. And they'll say, Drupal's difficult. Can we just use WordPress because it's got a great interface? And my cousin Ricky made a website with WordPress. It was so easy. Can we just do that? And that's a totally valid commentary, but we can make Drupal better. So I'm going to talk about them first, and then I'll start working through the other categories, somewhat in backwards order of importance. And what I'm going to do is, in the past, I've gone through slides and visual presentations of different things, but I'm going to do this live because what could possibly go wrong? Oops. Interesting. I'm trying to grab a browser, and it's not working.
This is what happens when you get pushed to the live server.
Yeah. Okay. Keynote was trying to take over every time I click something. Interesting. Okay. So simplytest.me is a great website for testing Drupal core or parts of Drupal, things that I can spell properly, Drupal core. So if you select Drupal core, select 8.0 beta 6. They just updated that. It was only up to beta 4 3 days ago when I demoed this in Osaka. Nice. Okay.
Is it still a half-hour limit?
Yes.
Okay.
30 minutes. So I always, because there's so much going on with Drupal 8, I always have to kick in another installation partway through the presentation, but that's okay. And one interesting aspect of installing Drupal this way, just because it's a service that they provide, is most of the time, the first people who are going to see Drupal 8 are going to be the marketers, CTOs, CIOs, CEOs even maybe. And you're not going to show them the Drush way of doing things. You'll show them the pretty nice looking interface. And as you can see, they've cleaned up the installation screen sets to a certain degree. I mean, it's still basically like Drupal 7, but some things are kind of cleaned up. Nice round buttons and stuff like that. Anyway, so Simply Test Me provides all of the credentials to get this going. We'll see what Beta 6 looks like on Simply Test Me in terms of speed. So Drupal 8 is bigger, and it is in beta, so it's going to be slower. I'm often asked at this point, so is it going to be faster than Drupal 7? Well, depends. I can make a pretty fast Drupal 7 site, and I can make a pretty fast Drupal 6 site, but as you build and build sites, as we all know, they get slower and you got to optimize. And if I put a Drupal 8 site on something that doesn't have, some kind of caching system enabled, then, your mileage may vary. So it's as fast as you make it be. If you put it on, like I am hosting or something, no offense to them, but if you put it on there, I've worked with a client recently who was hosted on there. We moved him to Pantheon. Disclaimer, I'm a Pantheon partner, so I got to get that out of the way now. But I like Pantheon. I use it because I like it, not because they want me to be the partner or anything like that. I was using it for a good solid year or more beforehand. Aqua provides great service too, and Omega CC and Platform SH has good stuff now. Anyway, if you put it on a Drupal specific platform and optimize it, then everything should be, in theory, okay. Voila, Drupal 8. This really can't be cut off. How could I need you to see the menu bar.
Can you just adjust the size of the window?
Yeah.
Instead of being full screen?
Oh, I'm not actually in full screen.
The browser.
There you go.
Oh, it is? Okay, sorry. I guess. Oh, all right.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm just dragging it on my screen so the display isn't showing my full screen here. But that's fine. I'll just.
Oh, you're mirrored?
It should be. I'll check quickly. It would be nice if this was just dealt with.
It's probably mirrored, and then the display has overscan on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh.
Oh, yeah, you just need to adjust the
Wow.
res high.
Wow. Where was I at?
Go big. No, you were bigger than that.
Was it?
I don't know what it is. I honestly don't know what it is, but it's
Probably do 1920 by 1080.
Yeah.
Oh wait, he's got VGA.
Yeah, it's
I don't
VGA.
know if
It'll
VGA will do
it'll
that.
still do it.
Will it?
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's
For some reason, it's off center.
It's better.
well, you can see the whole screen anyway.
There we
so
go.
My display looks
You're all
like
set.
hell, but that's fine. As long as you can read it up there, then that's good. Triple 8 is quite small. Hey, you got a little preview.
Compact.
All right. Right. So, okay. Yeah, we can see everything. Now my screen's a little weird, but whatever. Okay, so where was I? Content authors. Right. Okay. So an initiative as part of all this called Spark was created, and it's basically the content authoring experience is being improved via that. So there are several points about that. With improving the authoring experience, actually I'll just create content first and then I'll start walking through those points. So let's see here. So I usually have this bookmarked, so I have to forgive me on that, but where'd it go? So I'd like to tell people, if you're not Riker Ipsuming, then you're Ipsuming wrong. That image is freaky, but so be it. Sorry, things are just a little hard to see here. So I'm going to create a basic page in Drupal 8. And you can already see some of the nomenclature here, like module is now called extend, etc. So just a few small tweaks and changes in the interface as I walk through. So I'll create some content. So paste that in and, of course, make it so. Now, what you'll see here is... right, so we have a built-in WYSIWYG. This is Drupal 8 by default, so built-in WYSIWYG out of the box. There's debate. Karen McGrain at past DrupalCon talked about how WYSIWYG shouldn't be included in a content management system, but marketers and the CTOs and the people that you're selling Drupal 8 to, they want to see something that looks semi-complete. Basically, they want to see WordPress, and Drupal 8 has taken a lot of cues from WordPress and other great management systems too. But so you've got a built-in WYSIWYG now, and if I want to, I can change this from basic HTML to full HTML, and then the toolbar becomes a little more bigger, better, and can do more things, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to walk through all of it, but so yeah, in terms of interface, save and publish, save as unpublished. So this is a big change. And you may think it's a small change, but it's actually really huge for those people who are in there editing content. Now, I don't know about everyone in the room, but I like to go in and make some of these things happen in Drupal 7. I'll add some buttons in here for, that sort of mimic what's happening here with save and publish. These items are now visible on the right side of the screen. They used to be obviously down here. So things are visible. Even on a wide display like this, if you shrink it down, this will still be visible on at least a 1280 by 786 display. But anyway, I will save and publish this with my bolded grievance, whatever. So there you go. So there's your post, built-in WYSIWYG, basic page, make it so, et cetera, et cetera. So that covers the revised content editing screen and also the built-in WYSIWYG, and then I'll show the other magic little thing, inline editing. So now, you see the little arrow there. If I want to do quick edit, whoa, indeed. So I'm going to change the title. Oops, one click. I don't know, what's something I could say? Fire at will. I don't know, is that another line? Fire at will. Fire at will. Save. And there you go. So it's saved. And now I'll click edit and I'll click in. That's an easy one. Enter data. Save. And there we go. Inline editing. And of course you can still edit the way we did in the past. I should almost just watch up here and I can see what's going on. Right. So that's a very quick overview of the revised content creation page. So of course that's content creation.
Question. Are
Yes.
you taking questions now or later?
It's Q&A time throughout the whole thing. I like
Okay.
to do it that way.
How does quick edit work with revisioning?
That's a good question, actually.
And fields.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I tried to follow some of the arguments about that.
Oh, I didn't make an actual change. That would help. Try that one more. Klingon. Spell me like him. All right. There you go. So edit's the most recent.
Okay.
Yeah. But if you want to edit a revision, is that the question?
I was just curious, I wasn't sure if it created a new revision when you save the quick edit or if it just keeps editing the last revision that you had.
Well, you can see the revisions happening in here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can revert to one and do an edit there or whatever. But yeah, it would be... Now, that segues into my next part of this demonstration. So mobile. Right. Sorry, things are just a touch hard to see on here. For the record, this is Firefox Developer Edition, and that, as you probably just saw, it has a lot of built-in tools that we would maybe previously use in the web developer toolbar, but it's got built-in views of various responsive sizes, etc., etc. But you can see what's happening with Drupal 8 now. This is, again, out of the box. If I click this out of the way, here, this is what it looks like now. That's me sliding my mouse finger around, so you'll have to forgive me on that. But so if I want to quick edit, so if I touch, quick edit, same basic experience. Whoops. Spell that right? That doesn't matter. Okay. And then touch and save, and there you go. And I can do it the old-fashioned way, go in and say, fire at.
Even the tabs are intelligent.
Finally.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that jumps ahead a little bit, but part of that is due to HTML5 and core. I'll talk about that in a little more detail. But so you can kind of see what's happening here. Responsive menu. You can click into modules. See some modules in there. So it's pretty slick in terms of responsive out of the box, as they like to say. So there you go. See things resizing, etc., etc. I'll close out of this and I'll do it live with the browser, resizing the browser, etc. You can see things moving around. Actually, I'll just go to the back to site. You can see it happening here too. Yeah. So, boom, Drupal 8 responsive, which is nice. All right. Okay. Yeah, so Riker Ipsum, please use that. If you're into Star Trek, I guess. There's all kinds of stuff, Japan Ipsum and everything else. If you do any presentations, it's always good for a little laugh. Right, okay, so there's the whole content authoring experience, kind of in a nutshell, and a demonstration of it, how it works on mobile. You can actually go to Simply Test Me and fire it up on your phone or whatnot and bring up Drupal 8 and give it a shot and play around with it and see what it looks like. All right. So the next group is, I won't bring up the slide. Next group is site builders. We'll just jump through it like that. And as some of you may know, Views is in core. Yeah. And one of the great things about that is several like lists of the users, which is now called people, because users are people. Imagine the odds. If you don't know Drupal and you come to it, you're going to know what people means. List of people and that sort of thing. Content, files, front page, etc. These are all views. So if I go into, you can actually go in and edit them if you want. So if I go to edit.
Without installing 3 modules? What are we going to do with all that extra time?
Install 3 more. I'm sure we can find useful things to waste time on. So here's the display. Of course, there's only one user on the site right now. But you can actually go in and say, edit things. And you can see what this looks like, obviously. Views is not that complicated. It was the first initiative that was essentially completed because they just brought it in, tweaked a few things. Of course, it may sound a bit flippant, but they brought it in, tweaked a few things, and it's working. So that's good. And as we all know, so who we've all built Drupal 7 sites? Did anybody here build Drupal 6 sites? Okay, so Drupal 7 was released January 2011. When was the first production Drupal 7 site that you built? Not counting migrations or that sort of thing, like from the ground up. In production.
Probably like 6 to 8 months later. We were waiting for the performance issues to go away in the first few versions.
October.
It was a solid year later for me because I just didn't have the modules I needed.
Right. So Views is one of those, right? It was in beta for at least until midsummer, I think. And
maybe it's still in
build
beta.
Production site with beta.
Yeah.
If you caught the right dev release, though,
yeah.
you could catch it while it was working.
So you too like to play Russian roulette. Yeah.
Especially with Views.
Yeah.
It's a nice thing about Git, though. You can always roll it back if you grabbed a bad one.
Yeah. If only I was using it back then.
When was the Great Git migration? Was that after 7 or before 7?
What was that?
It was after. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Definitely after 7.
So there's those of us
3
running
years ago?
multiple version control systems on our computers.
Yeah. Tortoise SVN, yay. Yeah. Yeah, all that aside, though, In theory, and this is, when I say in theory, I mean this is my theory, with views in core, I think that simple Drupal 8 production sites can go live before the 6-month time frame after it's released. So in theory, if Drupal 8's released a year from today, we could have production sites that are out in the wild, not counting these beta releases that are happening lately, but like actual full production sites that are not shop sites, but actual client sites within 3 to 6 months after. And I mean simple sites, like the really complex, crazy stuff like data.gov. No, that's not going to happen. But, you know, there's way too many contrib modules and custom things, et cetera, that are happening there. But anyway, I think the fact that uses in core will speed up the usage of Drupal 8. But I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit with when we can use Drupal 8. And I got the beach ball of death. Just give it a second here. Is that me or is that Drupal 8? That is the dev edition of Firefox, sorry.
There was an update earlier today, so you've
I
been
thought
on
I
a
grabbed it,
plane.
actually,
If
yeah.
you've been on a plane and it hasn't updated, that might be the issue.
Too bad you don't know anyone at Firefox. Mozilla.
All too well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a couple of friends who work for Mozilla here in Rochester, even.
Oh wow.
Oh,
Call them up.
they're everywhere.
There's a
I
few
give
RIT
anytime
grads.
Firefox crashes, I'm like, John, it's broken. He's like, you know, I'm not on that team. I'm like, I'm still gonna complain.
Absolutely.
What's going on here?
It's okay to have a few technical difficulties. It's not like we're recording this or anything.
That's what editing's for.
The first time I did this presentation, which was almost a year ago in at the first Drupal camp in Japan, of course, you know, pretty big audience. I was demoing, I think it was the 4th release out in a while or something. I can't remember, but Alpha 4 or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, I clicked content, white screen of death.
Oh.
The content management system's content page died. Sayonara.
There, baby.
Yeah. So what I was going to do next, actually, sorry, is I'll show you. So, you know, it's one thing, oh, the content page in mobile and some admin pages, but views in mobile is like this. Let me get that out of the way. It's pretty slick. Yeah.
Whoa.
So we're jumping around a lot here. But yeah, so there's actual mobile, like phone size.
So what's the definition of a view again?
Query builder.
Thank you.
Basically.
Yeah, visual query builder.
Yeah.
So you can point and click and decide which
Yeah.
data you want to pull in, display, how you want to display it.
Where you want to display it.
Got it.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you.
Now imagine explaining views and view to someone who just learned what the English word for view is. Right? Fortunately, I'm working with a translator over there in Japan, and she did a little programming back in the day. So I explained that it builds SQL statements, et cetera, and you don't really have to write them. It creates this stuff, and then you just have to theme it. And she said, oh, I did SQL like 10, 15 years ago or whatever it was. Perfect. But not everyone has that advantage, that extra edge. So explaining views to someone who has no idea about database structures or anything like that, it's a bit of a challenge sometimes. But
And it's not MVC. It's not the V in MVC.
Yeah,
Yeah, the translation seems like SharePoint Business Connectivity Services. Back doing some code squirting.
Kind of like that.
Yeah.
all right. So speaking of, how much time do I have on these still here? 14 minutes. That should be enough to get through this. So yeah, speaking of site building, configuration management. So I mentioned that one of the initiatives was, or one of the goals, sorry, of the project was to separate content from configuration. And, here we go. Stats report, we can ignore that. Okay. So, who has lost at least 50 hours of sleep working with features? and the rest of you are lying. Okay.
Or don't know what features are.
Don't use it.
Okay, so who doesn't know what features is? It's a module.
You and I are new to Drupal.
Okay, great. So imagine you want to migrate from a development website to a testing website to a live website.
Yeah.
So what has happened is a module was created many moons ago called Features, and it has been morphed into this tool that will do that for you.
Right.
But it's not really meant to do that. That's the simplest way of putting it.
It's IT.
Bingo, yes. It's been kind of hacked into this process of doing that. Because it can. And it works 99.2% of the time. And that other percent of the time, you just want to go on vacation. Yes.
You have a much higher success rate than I do.
Yeah.
I'm making up numbers just
The more moving pieces you have,
Yeah.
the less likely it is to succeed, and the more imperative it is that it actually does succeed. So it's kind of one of those.
Yeah, so it creates this conundrum. So for example, in Drupal, if I go to something as simple as performance. Now, this is just for demonstration purposes. You would handle these things in other ways, but at its base level, Drupal can aggregate CSS files and JavaScript files. And okay, great. So,
You may have.
okay, sorry.
Sorry.
No problem, no problem. We're all here for a good laugh and to hopefully
You
not
can
laugh at the Drupal end date. Yeah. Okay. So. I'm kind of jumping around a little bit with this, but so I'll kind of get back to basics with Drupal 8. So part of the initiative was to separate configuration and content, and this is all in the database. So what they wanted to do was pull the configuration out of the database and put it into the file system so that it can be moved from server to server to server, environment to environment to environment. And the benefit of that is that it goes into source control, and then your content is separated, and the configuration is being handled elsewhere. Now, of course, there's a little bit of meta configuration still in the database to handle the configuration of the file system, but that's just a minor detail. And what they were working on up until April, so we're 3 years into the project, was having it in the file system, like I was saying. And so if I clicked this checkbox, unchecked it, and saved. In the file that the configuration is saved in, this would now be toggled to say false. And of course, if I change it back to the way it was, it would be stated as true in this file. And that file was called YAML. Can still be called YAML. I'll get to that in a second. But it's a human-readable XML format, which is a total lie because the average human wouldn't really know what's going on. We can all sort of work our way through it and understand it if we've seen it maybe for the first time. But it's really just a format that Drupal is able to read and pull in that information. And then your site will be configured as per the files. And I'll show another screen shortly that kind of talks about that. But they changed their minds in April for a variety of reasons. One was security of your file system on an initial installation, speed of installation, and those were the two prime things that were talked about. And there was also the problem that even I made the mistake of doing where in demonstrations people were showing you editing the file live, and you're not really supposed to do that. I was doing it just to demonstrate the idea of this becoming true and false, but that didn't go over so well with some of the higher-ups, we'll say. So a couple thoughts about this being put back into the database on a first installation. You can still move it into the file system, which is my preference. I don't know how everyone else feels about that, but I like the idea of configuration being in out of the database and in source control, so that you can move it through your development production system. The concept of security in your file system. Well, if your file system isn't already secured, you've got bigger problems to deal with, right? The performance thing on an initial install and demonstrating it to the CIO, CTOs, marketers, etc. That's kind of a valid concern, but either way, you can still go in after the fact and set it up so that this is all in the file system.
It's also performance for ongoing things too. Accessing files is not usually as quick as hitting the database with a cached version.
Yes, yeah. So read-write access and that kind of thing too. But if you're optimizing your systems well enough, shouldn't be too much of an issue. I mean, it really depends on the size of the site, what's going on in terms of complexity and that sort of thing. Simple sites, it shouldn't make any difference whatsoever. But yeah, so that's the basic idea there. So it's back in the file system now, and in the database, and you can pull that out depending on the case that's important to your website and your configuration.
Is there a way to reconcile the two? Like, kind of like you can do with features where it'll tell you, like, okay, in the file system we have this, in the database we have this, or is it like one or the other? You can only have it in one spot or another.
So that actually alludes to what's happening with features now. So features still exists, and they're doing work on it for Drupal 8. And the basic idea is that features will go back to being used for what it was intended for in the first place, which is, those kinds of use cases. There is, the thing I tell people is the power of Drupal is that it can do anything, and the problem with Drupal is that it can do anything, right? So there's always a path to make things happen like that. So yeah, you can reconcile it, but maybe the overall theme, I think, of Drupal 8, and this is just from my perspective, but it improves on several key areas, but one area that is not necessarily an improvement or a new feature is that it standardizes several of the things that we were doing in 7, or are doing in 7, like configuration management and how we set up a WYSIWYG and all those sorts of things. You can still customize all those elements, but ultimately it's giving you some things out of the box that the people who pay the big bucks, the big contracts and that sort of thing, that they've been asking for a long time. So
so you're a Pantheon guy, so are we still able to do, for the different environments, have different sets of variables within the configuration file, like we do in settings.php, essentially?
Well, if you're familiar with Pantheon, they do things within the settings PHP file that we would do elsewhere, right? So there are Pantheon-specific things. Now, they do have, and I should mention this maybe earlier, if you go to getpantheon.com/d8, it will spin up a Drupal 8 site for you on their platform. Now, they're still testing, debugging, that sort of thing. I'm working on migrating my own site to D8 on Pantheon just to see what will happen and see how it works. So I'm still investigating some of those things.
And for Drupal 8, did they also announce there's not like a upgrade path the same way there was for 6 to 7? It's basically like you have to migrate your content over.
It is.
I'll talk about that one in a second too.
Sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
No problem.
I do have a question about the configuration because it has to do with their questions of environment-specific things, and I've been meaning to look into it to see if this solves the problem, but I haven't had time. Is the new state API in Drush, does that kind of fix that? Because now all your configuration is going to be global for the most part. You're going to transfer it between your sites, but certain things, like say you have API addresses that you have a staging service and you have a production service, you obviously don't want to override that when you're deploying your configuration. So there is a new state API, and I'm wondering if maybe that is that, and you could come with a workflow with Drush where you can, have it in source control somewhere, your different environments, and it will pull from that, and when you deploy, it will make sure that your state for that environment is set to that. Have you played around with that at all?
Actually, I haven't played around with it enough to know. Yeah, I can't give you an answer.
I'm thinking that that's going to be the answer in the long term, but I'm not sure where they are with that now.
Yeah, there's been a lot of work done on, I'll kind of touch on APIs a bit later, but there's been a lot of work done on that, but I don't know what the state of it, I don't know what the state of the state API is yet.
By the way,
to answer the question well enough. Sorry?
Yeah, they don't know what Drush is, right?
Oh, so Drush is a command line tool specific to Drupal where you can enable modules, download modules, update core. Instead of, in the past, I'm sure we all did this, we'd log into an FTP, remove all the files, we add in the new files from the latest downloaded zip file of the latest Drupal release, put those in there, and hope everything worked well. Go to the update.php file.
Allow you to do scripting, your command line scripting. Would Drush be used for command line scripting and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, you can do.
You can clear caches.
So it sounds like, all right.
You can export things.
Yeah, make files where you have a whole list of things that happen when you fire off a command.
So, but is it strictly a command line interface for that kind of stuff
Yeah.
where you're doing manual typing, or can you actually do batch scripting?
Both.
Yeah.
Okay.
So does DOS prompt.
Yeah,
Uh,
only work.
Okay, PowerShell now.
There.
what was I going to do? Yeah.
When I discovered
Sorry.
Drush, it was probably the happiest moment I've ever had throughout my Drupal career.
Yeah.
And I'm not really kidding.
Yeah, because I mean, your entire site could be white screen of death, like
But you can
inaccessible, but you can
you
still
can
use
through
command
Drush.
line
Yeah.
and utility to do
Right.
things.
Got it.
That's ignore all this junk up here. That's just from the help file, but this is sort of, I just write Drush status and it gives me like a quick overview of what's happening there.
That's like
Yeah, and if I did, I don't know.
Well, drush up is
Yeah.
the magic, you know. That's like the magic. It may take you hours if you don't have a good FTP connection to do a full
Yeah,
system
no,
update
actually.
on a Drupal 6, Drupal 7 site.
It's funny how now that throws an error where before it would just say, okay, very quickly. And you're like, wait a minute, it's not okay. Like,
So-
that should have taken 3 minutes.
So one good point actually, speaking of Drush, is so for Drupal 8 you need Drush 7. And Pantheon currently supports 5.10, so my environment is set up so that it will work with both, which is pretty tricky to set up. I'd never done it before, and I did it just a few months ago. It's got its own set of headaches. But just to quickly jump back to the configuration piece then. Whoops, what did I click on? Sorry, things are jumping around here. It looks like I'm clicking on the right stuff, but it's actually very tiny here, a bit pixelated. So I'll just do a very quick example of doing configuration through the interface here. So I'm going to, what to do, oops. I want to do a full, I want to do single, and we'll export. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to export a content type, and I will pick basic page. And this is essentially what the YAML will look like. Can everyone see that well enough? Yeah. I mean, it's like JSON, so you can see revisions and things like that. So content types, you familiar with that?
from a SharePoint perspective.
Okay.
Essentially a data model for an object.
Got
Yeah.
it.
So in this case, this is the basic page that you would create. So you've got, the web page or whatever, and the rest are like blog posts or something.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I was talking about true and false states. So, a new revision, I don't have revisioning turned on for this basic page content type. But if I turn it on, this will now say true within the configuration. But what I'm going to, and UUIDs throughout Drupal 8, which is really nice.
Yes.
See, that always gets a round of commentary. All the basic stuff that you would expect. There's no dependencies for this particular content type, and et cetera, et cetera. So, anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to export a single content type. All right. What was I doing here? Oh. Content type. All right, cool. So I've copied that over. So I'm going to go back to structure, content types, basic page. I'm going to delete it. Now you would normally not do this, but for demonstration purposes, so there's no basic page content type now. Go back to configuration. So on import, I'll select the content type, I'll paste. So I'm not going to change any of the fields here. Actually, maybe I will. I've never actually done this in a live demo, so I'll just change it to true, do an import. I will confirm it. And there you go. Now we'll go back to structure, content types, basic page. Now if I go to edit, grab it, basic page, title, previews, published, create new revision. There it is.
So this
Can't do that in Drupal 7.
3 modules. Well, you can, but with C tools.
Sorry. Out of the box, Drupal 7 doesn't do this kind of thing. Yeah. And that's very, very simple. Now,
does it have collision detection then? Because, I mean, you've got the UUID.
Yeah, so I seem to recall demoing this at Drupal Camp Pittsburgh, and I didn't delete the other, the base content type, the basic page content type, sorry. And there was an error that was thrown, but I can't remember what it was. And I haven't tried doing it since. So I'll give a partial, sort of, kind of, yeah, maybe answer. I recall it had something built in there. But, yeah. So anyway, that's configuration management at its basic level, which is more than 0 from Drupal 7. I can show something on the slide as a visual demonstration here, but where did the slides go? That's right, I had to close it because it kept taking it over my screen. Okay. So in terms of those YAML files I was talking about, so this is kind of what's happening: an Active Directory, a staging directory, and your configuration, etc. This is all in the Drupal 8 file system. So there's a YAML file for everything: actions, blocks, all kinds of configuration going on there. If you see a full screen, you'll see the performance.yaml file, which had that CSS JavaScript stuff I was talking about. But this is kind of what would happen if you were doing it through the file system and moving things from production, development to production, etc. Just to give a visual kind of clue of what was happening there. All right. Okay. What are we doing for time? 21 minutes. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about is going to extend. Sorry. Multilingual. So Drupal 8 comes with multilingual out of the box. And all that means is all of those things that we did in Drupal 7, all the different modules we'd install and other things that we would configure are all built into Drupal 8 now. Not the language files themselves, but the actual ability to do translation, etc. in there. So just for argument's sake, I'm going to click this stuff while we're here, save a little time maybe.
I also noticed search is built into the modules page finally.
Oh,
that's
Yeah, that's
Oh, you don't have to use module filters anymore, huh?
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, another nice UI tweak, more for site builders than for developers or whatever. But, yeah, so if I do ag aggregator, yeah, works just like we always do.
No, you're not a different prescription.
So now when I go into configuration after I've enabled that stuff,
Please silence your cell phones.
Sorry about that.
you missed everything I said about multilingual.
I know.
The usher's going to kick you out now.
Yeah, I said it in that silent language known as cold stare silence. Okay, so I'll just quickly go back to, so on the configuration page now, languages, content language translations, user interface translations, configuration translation, those are now available there. So I'll click on languages. And here's the language screen, and I will add Japanese because I was just there. So there's this whole list, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll click Japanese, add, and it's going to go fetch the language file.
Oh, that's awesome.
So you don't need the 3 modules usually you'd install for multi.
They're already there. Yeah.
Awesome.
After like 9 modules, you don't have to install anymore.
And-
It's unbelievable.
much like what I was saying, this standardizes that experience that we were trying to build for 7.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, because that's also messy. It was which 3 modules do I use depending on use case kind of thing.
Yeah. It's a 0 to 306. Interesting.
Like, I don't know 18.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did it not pull down the language file?
Maybe it didn't.
Batteries.
I just showed this and everything was in Osaka and everything was there, so that's interesting. It works perfectly 98% of the time. What is that line? 98% of the time it works perfect 100% of the time? Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's just pretend it pulled everything in and everything was fine.
Beta regression, probably.
Yeah. very well might be. That may affect some of what I was going to show next, but that's fine. I'll just click through all the different screens here so you can kind of see what's happening. Right, so I can say content translation, basic page, all the different elements of it. I'll just leave everything checked for kicks. Default language is English. Show the selector on create and edit. Okay, so I'm going to go back to content. All right, yeah, I don't have content now. Well, that's fine. And I select a basic page right now. Okay, so hello.
Right, so you created a page earlier, then you deleted the content type, and it didn't freak out.
No, you had to.
Different.
This is
Oh,
yeah.
different.
While you
I got
weren't
excited
watching,
for a
my
minute.
sleight of hand, I reinstalled. I noticed it was down to 2 minutes, so I whipped up another simply test me.
So you're
You can
all
also-
And for my next trick, Drupal 8 will work bug free. Yeah.
Chris, try Drupal8.com. Gives 24 hours, but it's only 8.0.0 dev.
Yeah, it's
the
not the
problem.
latest beta.
That's the
Yeah.
problem.
Well, it might be. I haven't actually checked it in
No,
the
I
last
just checked
little while, so.
That's still the dev.
Yeah.
But maybe we call, the other Nick. We can get it done too.
Right, so. Call me Chiwa. Hello. Everyone knows konnichiwa. It's one way of saying hello in Japanese. Right, konnichiwa. So now you've got 2 sets of translations. Yeah, and everything was done built with default Drupal 8 core.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it actually works, which is also amazing. A very simple example just with the title, but there you go. So now if I go into content, you'll see hello and konnichiwa, basic page, and there it is. So what's really important about this from maybe a marketing perspective is they're trying to push Drupal into new markets. So, instead of preaching to the choir, they're trying to push into Asia. Like, I'm sure all of you know, or you'll know now, that Dries made a trip to China, he made a trip to Japan. I've had a lot of discussions with the Drupal Association about doing stuff with the Japanese community there. A great example is, so at their first Drupal camp, I was presenting this actual presentation, slightly previous version of it, but one of the questions that came up was about learning Drupal. And, they're brilliant people over there for sure, and, talented programmers, designers, all that sort of stuff. And one of the roadblocks is a guy put up his hand, he said, I'm going to gloss over a lot of the translation that happened for this conversation, but he essentially said, how do I learn views? Because I don't know Drupal and I want to learn views because it's supposed to be like one of the most essential parts of Drupal. And I said, well, there are multi-part series on YouTube. Like there's a 10-part series by the Code Karate guys and whatever. You could just go and watch that and it will help you to learn views and views in Drupal. And he said, but it's in English. And so I'm thinking, oh, I'm an idiot. Okay, yeah, of course. He can see them pointing and clicking, but without the context of the English guide through it, or the language guide through it, I should say, you can get lost pretty easily. Because if you understand what Views is doing at its base, essentially SQL Builder, then... Hi.
Is it a bad time to pick up the catering event?
Worst time ever.
Okay.
Come on in.
Oh.
It's okay, right? Sorry.
Sorry, guys.
You just need to sign a few things. You're being recorded. So.
Actually, you are.
Yeah.
That's recording it. Sorry, this other way.
Maybe words for WordPress.
All right. So, where we were talking about the efficiency of staff service, right? Yeah. Okay. So learning views. If you understand the fundamental concepts of what it's doing, you could probably get through the screen, like even if you the video, even if you shut the volume down and understand. But it's really helpful to actually hear the trainer, the voiceover, explain what's going on. So the language barrier of translation working easily in Drupal 8 will the removal of the barrier of translation working easier in Drupal 8 will hopefully help them to move it into other markets. And from our perspective, well, we're speaking English and it's not so hard to deal with, but there could be other opportunities for us to build multilingual sites around the globe, because as Drupal grows, it provides more business. And I'm sure, as most of you know, there's at least from my experience, there's more work than there are people who can do it. So having more work is not a bad thing, for sure, more available work. So it's important from that aspect. And also, the growth of Drupal, it's, if the availability of work starts to decrease for whatever reason, growing it into other markets helps to maybe stabilize that, the future of our jobs or our work or something like that. So there's a lot of benefits to that too. And also, growing the community globally is a great thing, because from my personal experience in Japan, they're like crazy enthusiastic about wanting to work with Drupal, wanting to be a part of the community, going to the Drupal events and all that sort of stuff. So it's really great to see that kind of thing. It's inclusive on a personal level, I suppose. But all of that aside, we'll move on from multilingual. Showed some screens, that's good. Oh, okay, so I'm just going to dive into the aspect of design and theming. So Drupal 8 outputs HTML5 out of core. Everything is HTML5, which is great. So forums, and we mentioned tabbing and all those sorts of things. All those great elements of HTML5 are at our fingertips now with Drupal 8. So, I mean, that's that at simplest. There isn't really a lot to show in terms of that, but you can view the source code and see things going on. In a second, I'll show an example of Twig, and you'll see some HTML5 going on there. And speaking of Twig, so they're ditching the current templating system in Drupal, and they're replacing it with Twig, which is, just to jump ahead a little bit, it comes from the inclusion of external PHP libraries and templating libraries and that sort of thing. So I'm just going to bring up an example of Twig. See if this works.
PHP templates go in there.
Yes. Yeah. So Twig, I mean, you can kind of, who has never themed a Drupal site before? Yeah. Okay. So in the past, or currently, actually, it's still true, what's happening here in these double curly braces would be PHP code. And that's bad because themers sometimes want to put all kinds of PHP code in the theme files. And one of the obvious reasons why that's bad is then you start executing code that's being output, right? So
you end up like a WordPress theme.
Yeah, it reminds me of classic ASP.
Yeah.
You can start.
So this removes any possibility of that, and it basically makes the front end actually a front end, not back end server interaction stuff. I mean, it's still calling things like, for example, user picture, right? So in the past we'd have some PHP tags around that, whatever. But now with Twig, you just put user_picture, and boom, the user picture shows up there. This is obviously the most basic example. You can do a lot more things with it, but there's also still control structures, so you can do ifs, end ifs. What else we got going on here? There's some other functions and that kind of thing. There's, as you can see, there's methods and that sort of thing. So Twig's got some built-in coding of its own. So it is a whole new syntax, but it's cleaner. Nobody's writing PHP code in the front end anymore, so that it makes it more secure. Things will run faster, all that sort of stuff. So one thing that I don't really touch on in any of this presentation in terms of slides is headless Drupal, which I should probably add into this at this point, because anybody not know what that means? Okay.
I'd like to hear the latest explanation of what it means, because there's arguments about it less than most.
Well, at its simplest, you don't use this, you use something else. Right? Okay. So you don't use Drupal's front end. Drupal powers the content, and it becomes a layer in the stack. So there's something, Drupal, and then maybe like, I've seen Angular stuff happening where people are outputting things via services with views, and they're powering a front end with Angular.
Really would just be a service engine, and you can power anything. Be it a front end, be it another service that takes the data into something else, just anything else. But before you couldn't do it because it always wanted to output that.
I've seen replications of this with Drupal 6 and 7 sites. Basically, they're using the feeds module to output data onto a variety of devices, actually. It's a TV channel in Toronto doing that. And it's really clunky, and like features, it works 96.2% of the time. Notice the number keeps going down.
Going down.
Yeah, there's a reason for that. Their system works well. They put a lot of money and effort into it when they could have, with something like this, they remove the front end and start doing something in a stack. It's more meant to do that kind of thing. They wrote a lot of custom modules and that sort of stuff to make it work. But I'm kind of preluding to the services, the new web services initiative. But basically, to jump back to Twig, you've got a whole new syntax, which yes, you do have to learn it. But much like HTML, you could probably pick it up in like a weekend kind of thing. And then once you start doing some themes with it, it's really quite beautiful. There's some stuff out there in the wild. Some shops are being very bold and redoing their shop site in Drupal 8.
We talked about that today.
Yeah. Like we as in the group? Or
No, like me and people I work with.
Okay, yeah. What was the latest one that did it? I just saw it.
Yeah, I just saw it today in Germany.
Amazingly,
Right?
Yeah,
Amazingly
Amaze.
Labs. They actually put a client site on it.
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah.
So they would be like the first examiner at First 7.
What was their... I can't remember the link.
I was looking at this one. I don't remember what it is, but
Go away.
It's a bold move depending on what the current blockers are. Like if there's any security ones in the issue queue, you're gonna be like, oh hey.
The
Yeah.
first thing I thought is they are bold and it's great. And was this the site?
That's it.
Yeah, that's the site. So it's really bold and it's really great to do that.
Scroll down. There's some more pictures.
It's a strong marketing push.
it's dangerous.
We're willing to put your site on beta software.
But this
When
is
marketing takes over.
Yeah.
this is a Drupal 8 site right there. So the thing is, if a client is okay with it, and you're okay with pouring extra resources into a client site, then sure, go ahead. But Dries, I think, said it best, and I'm going to really paraphrase, but it was like, if you don't mind fixing it all the time, and you don't mind not sleeping, and you don't mind paying extra attention to things and writing all kinds of custom contrib modules that may do things that will be in core later, and dealing with performance issues and all this stuff, yes, use Drupal 8 now. Right? You can see the video. It was DrupalCon Austin back in June. Someone asked him flat out, like, can we use Drupal 8 now? And that's sort of the answer that he gave. But the other part of the answer was start planning major site upgrades, like a year from now, a year and a half from now, with Drupal 8 in mind, which makes sense. So if you've got a huge site like, I don't know who's doing the Sony Music site, but that's the one that jumps to mind. I think Lullabot did them back in the day.
Yeah.
But if you're rebuilding the Sony Music website, start plotting it now with Drupal 8 because it will have all these features that are standardized that I've been going over that you can use for that site now. So why not? That doesn't mean you're building with Drupal 8 right now, but you're architecting with Drupal 8, which is totally a smart thing to do, I think, at this point. Or you get guinea pigs like, I'm not even going to try and say it. Was it something Shaft? I don't know, whatever. Yeah. French and Deutsch. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, I really don't know much about this company, but
I know the developers
I'm
are
working all
sleeping.
night on that joke.
yeah.
I was waiting for when I could use it.
Just out of curiosity, I haven't actually looked at their source, but let's see what they've got here. Drupal 8. _1, which means I had one there before and it got replaced. It's really hard if you're just looking through the outputted code to see what's actually going on, but lots of divs, header tag, okay, so there's some HTML5, more divs, nav, okay, well that's good to see. So in theory, this is being output by Drupal 8 without any special things going on to make it say, like be the nav tag, but it's hard to say, of course, without actually seeing the code in the background. What's going on in the footer? It's not a really complicated site, so there you go. But actually, this probably hints at something too. Is that when you create a block, you can now put it anywhere multiple times. Right?
Yeah.
So context. Nice knowing you.
It does other things. Context doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's certainly one thing to keep in mind. So what else? I guess I was going to talk about development stuff next. Oh, I didn't really hint on that, but Drupal 8 has some built-in JavaScript libraries. Of course, we've had jQuery for a long time, but there's other things that assist with the front end. I'm not going to get into those in too much detail. Developers, the other group, which is probably most of us here. I'm kind of not so much a developer these days, but there's a lot of development stuff going on in Drupal 8. And I could literally do an entire 1-hour presentation on just the points that you see on the screen there. But at the highest level, Drupal 8 now includes components from Symfony 2, which means that we're now looking at PHP, object-oriented PHP. So we were talking about object-oriented programming before I got rolling.
And then moving to procedural.
Moving to procedural.
And now we all have to move back.
So I think I can only speak from personal experience, but I came from .NET, C#, and I got into a .NET Nude project. I'm not going to go into the nightmare terror sweats that I got from that and the reasoning, but I ended up doing a .NET project because we were trying to do some open source stuff with .NET, and it was internet based, so it wasn't really going to. The audience was going to be like a few hundred people, I guess, some staff at an insurance company, and it worked, but it was a real pain in the ass, to put it bluntly. And I left that job, went into therapy for about 10 years and came out. And it was actually about 3 months. And then I was thinking, well, what do I want to do? Do I really want to go full out open source? And so I ended up in Drupal, long story short. But over time, coming out of object-oriented and getting into procedural again after not doing PHP procedural stuff for 5 years, maybe 4 years, whatever it was. I just kind of lost interest. It felt like I was taking a step backward. So I started getting more into front-end stuff and site building, and eventually I've kind of failed upwards into project management and that sort of stuff. So, but Drupal 8's got me excited about object-oriented programming and just programming in general with it. And I've kind of heard some rumblings about that too up in the Toronto community. Different people are saying, yeah, I've been investigating like Angular and Ruby and different things, and Drupal 8's got them a little more excited again. So I don't know. Anybody got an opinion on that in the room? It's always interesting.
I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
and just a great example of just how easy they make it to override core. We were working on a module and the form caching wasn't working correctly. It was all kinds of things were breaking, and we couldn't figure out why. And long story short, our AJAX processing wasn't working. So there was an issue in the form controller, or there was an issue. We didn't want to cache our form in the AJAX. The core AJAX form controller requires it. So we simply extended the class, overrode that method, and then bam, we had our own AJAX controller, like 6 lines of code, overrode core without hacking core, without doing anything, and fixed our problem, and we were able to fix the issue that we were working on. And then eventually we had to go back because there was an issue with why it wasn't caching. But for the moment, and we were able to not be completely blocked on all development for one issue with 6-7 lines of code. It was just phenomenal. You can't do that in Drupal 7. You'd have to go in, hack the hell out of core, not save it, fix your issue and go back. It'd be a nightmare. Just object-oriented and the environment that we're going to be working in, it's going to be a huge departure for where we are, but it's going to be much for the better.
I highly recommend, we don't have 51 minutes and 51 seconds, but I highly recommend, speaking of that, Larry Garfield Krell, he did a presentation at DrupalCon Amsterdam. It's called Drupal 8 Crash Course, but it's really him just showing reams and reams of code from from his work as an initiative lead on the web services initiative. Let's see if I can just get a quick screen. Nope. Yeah, he goes through building modules and different things. Let's get something just a little more complex, maybe. Yeah, so you can get a bit of an idea of what's happening in terms of full inheritance. This is your YAML files that I was talking about earlier. Hugs is his thing, so if you know Larry, you kind of know he's into hugs and stuff. So he uses that as his example. He goes through routing, permissions, menu things, et cetera, et cetera. It's pretty good. Let's see if I can get something else here. Oops. I could really, for that developer screen that I've got in the slide, I could really just show his slideshow. Block-based, building blocks with code, et cetera, so you can see some things going on here.
Status.
Yeah. You can see inheritance happening here. So this is Drupal 8 object-oriented programming, right in front of your naked steaming eyes, as David Lee Roth would say. I don't know. Anyway, maybe I could get a link, send you a link or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Put this up into the meetup notes. But yeah, so here's even more full inheritance happening, building out forms, etc. So lots of cool stuff happening here. But literally, like, he spent 51 minutes. You could spend a full solid hour speaking about this kind of stuff. So I will store that for later. Okay. My simply test died. Okay. I could probably get through the rest without it. Symfony 2, YAML, object-oriented programming, improved APIs all throughout. There's a Drupal 8 API page. It's in progress. Let's see if I can dig it up really fast. Oops. API, Drupal.org/ what was the link? API. No, I can't remember. I removed all my bookmarks before I left for Japan.
Google will tell you.
Go to the Goog. Bam, right there. Oh, it was, yeah, API/Drupal/8. So if you go here, you can see, if you increase your screen size, you can see there's a whole lot of information about conventions and how to, extend and alter Drupal, security, etc., interface things, entity, state API. So, we were talking about state API. You can dig in here and you can see lots of information going on about what's happening with state API. As you can see, there's not much on the page. That maybe answers the question, but yeah, you can kind of get a bit of a glimpse into what's happening there. The documents, it's Drupal. The docs are kind of rough, but that's something I'd like to do a sprint on in Toronto. Maybe do some documentation sprints or
Did
something.
you ask about state?
No, I wasn't going to ask.
I did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I plan to dive into it. I just haven't had time. So maybe I'll do that and present at a meetup or something.
Yeah.
Hey, imagine that. That would be great.
State of the state.
State of state.
I forget, somebody asked about migration or
Yeah, upgrades.
That's
Yeah.
it.
So, in short, I did a bit of a presentation of this up in Toronto recently. In short, they're working on migration built into Drupal 8 core. They're targeting Drupal 6 to Drupal 8 migrations because they want to get all those D6 sites into D8 because it's good for marketing and it's great window dressing for the world to see. And there's progress on that. There's no real UI stuff available yet. And there was a series on metaltoad.com about migrating Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, content, taxonomy, users, nodes, etc. That was really good, but basically they show you that there's nothing really available for 7 to 8 migrations. You got to kind of do it yourself. And it's not hard to do. There's the command line commands that you can run, etc., to do it, but it's in progress. Yeah. But yeah.
So honestly, it's still pretty much, you're still pretty much looking at rebuild. Because what we do with a lot of our clients is honestly, by the time they're getting ready to update their Drupal site, it's around the same time we're like, some of your content's kind of old too. Instead of migrating, how about you get your marketing people in here and we'll build a new site and they can be putting in content as we go.
Yeah, build a new site and suck old content in via feeds or something, right?
I mean, you're essentially going to have to build a new site anyways because you're going to have to rewrite every single line of any custom code that you put into it. Any theme you put into it, you need to rewrite all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been testing D8 migrations, and blocks is crazy. That's the first thing you have to do is when you start testing is blocks. And so if you do a D6, D8, it's pretty fun. But, like,
Define pretty fun.
like I have a
In a, like a sick twisted way.
yeah, because things start going wrong, and then you're trying to.
Is there a safe word?
Yeah. But yeah, it's not there yet, and I was kind of confused. It got stuck on some content type as it's doing the import. Not sure where, but yeah, there's a lot of work on that still. That they've done a great job so far. But the blocks interface on 8 I found kind of confusing since they have, like you said, the instances like similar to context. But like when you go to edit, what you're normally used to on the blocks page, you're actually just editing the configuration. You're not editing the content of the block itself.
So does that mean that blocks are still not full entities in 8?
No, they were. It's just kind of weird because there's 2 areas you have to edit. Like there's the blocks, and then there's the blocks layout, and then there's the blocks content. There's 2 tabs in the blocks area.
So this is Metal Toad. This is the migrating nodes from Drupal 7. I'll go back to part 2. I think this was users or taxonomy.
So what's Metal Toad?
That's just their Drupal shop.
Okay.
They've got a blog. They write a lot of content. Yeah, Metal Toad, easy to remember. But yeah, they've got a series where they talk about what you can do there and creating configuration files to do this. Writing a custom module called Custom Migration to do some things. Dependencies using the Migrate Drupal, Migrate modules, etc. Yeah, so you're writing a lot of custom stuff to do it is what they're talking about here, basically, et cetera, et cetera. But I highly recommend this because they really walk through it in good detail, lots of code examples, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, as you can see, user information.
Well, and some of what will be nice. So we keep mentioning YAML. So YAML's yet another markup language, and like you said, it's very human readable, very nicely read file. Way around this, like Kevin was talking about with feeds, you can use feeds to pull RSS, XML, CSVs, whatever. In combination with the YAML, you could very easily, instead of click, add field, adding all your fields one by one, it's a lot easier. Hit enter, put in your name of your field, what kind of field it is, and then just import your content type in a single text file. And have it done in 15 minutes instead of pointing and clicking and setting all this config, with your mouse over and over and over again. So.
Yeah, and really the thing I like to tell people when they say, well, what's a theme, what's a developer, what's a site builder, what does all that mean in the Drupal world? Well, I tell them site builders are it's the stuff, if you point and click at stuff in the interface, you're site building. That's the simplest way to explain it. And you're actually going to remove some of that process and put it into more of a this is almost like DevOps stuff now, right? So DevOps is becoming bigger, and that's actually what I do more these days than anything. But there's a big space for that. But we were talking about Drush. Obviously, you'd have to read the whole article to get an idea of what they're doing here. But this will run the migration from Drush, and so you create this manifest YAML file, set your database credentials, etc., and it will take care of a lot of what's happening there. But again, there's like a lot of context for what's happening before that command is in this article. So I do highly recommend reading this if you're going to be thinking about moving a 7 site to an 8 site. It's all possible, but most of us just build a new site and suck the content in from the other site. That just seems to be the way to do it. It's easier that way. And as we were saying, by the time you're doing a new site, you're going to rethink everything on the site anyway. So all you're worried about is the content. The visuals changed. All new sites now are responsive by default. And if you've got a 5-year-old site, it's probably not responsive. We won't even talk about my personal site, but whatever. But waiting for a picture module anyway. So where does that leave me? Migration. So PHP unit testing. So there's PHP unit testing built into Drupal 8. Of course, now the big wave of things is, and I just built something recently with a developer in Toronto. We collaborated on this Travis CI Selenium Builder testing framework to run all of our tests. But there's simple testing built into Drupal 8. And web services, we've kind of already hinted at some of that. So it's probably the biggest, most important initiative, I think. No offense to any other initiative if anyone sees this on video. But there's been a huge amount of work on that and being able to connect Drupal to all these other elements out there. This is where the headless concept comes from. You're outputting content out of Drupal through views or through web services, and it can be displayed anywhere. I mean, here, a refrigerator, watches, all the hot kind of things that are happening now, probably on the side of these things in a year or two. Who knows, right? Device independence is really what web services is all about, and also platform independence in a sense. Larry, who is the initiative lead on web services, Larry Garfield, Krell, Crell,
The hug guy.
yes, the hug guy, redhead guy, always wears a vest. He's been very vocal and very prominent in what's happening with Drupal 8, and obviously spearheading web services and how that's worked, and done an amazing job on it. I don't know what else I could say about that. Anybody else have a comment on that? I personally think that's the biggest piece of Drupal 8.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
I think
This
it's
is the thing I just did.
Oh yeah, the rest.
Sorry?
It's the thing that I'm.
yeah. In tech today, there's not a single site that I work on that doesn't integrate with services, either ingesting or putting out there, and it's not having to go around a lot of different things or put work too hard to get working, like everything being in core and working out of the box, or at least being designed with that in mind, is going to make it a lot easier too.
What did you guys do before then? For the rest of
We hacked together about 40 different views with multiple displays. Using a module that'll output JSON or XML, which will have some issues with different fields in terms of formatting, and it ends up being like a real mess. One of our largest sites we built was Funimation.com, and they're pumping out videos and everything to Roku, to Samsung TV, to all these different devices that are really just consuming information now, Amazon Fire, whatever. The problem with all of them is they all want kind of their own organized XML in this particular way, or JSON organized this particular way. So outputting all of that data in the different ways for all those devices is a real pain. So everybody gets really excited when we talk about this.
We've written custom stuff because of that
Right.
reason. It's like, why hassle bending views and the other things when we're coders, we're developers, we know how it should interact, so we write a custom module, we pull the information out that we need, we format it the way the service wants. But then now for each service you're dealing with, you're doing that there, you're doing that there, you're doing that there. It becomes, it becomes, either way, whether you're bending it or whether you're doing it yourself, you're working a lot harder than it will be. This will make it a lot easier because, essentially Drupal 8 is, to me, it's looked at a lot of these problems that we've had, and incredibly smart people have fixed a lot of those problems. And that is Drupal 8.
Fix for standardized, right?
Fix and standardize. Like configuration management was a huge issue. Because we were using something that wasn't meant to do it, and we were doing it on big sites. And it's now like people who are much smarter than me had been looking and thinking about that problem for years, and they got to start with a fresh slate and say, okay, let's fix this from the beginning, and let's do it in core. And that's what happened with configuration, that's what's happening in web services, and this is all happening in this one release. And to me, that's the power of Drupal 8, because, a lot of people are scared because it's like, oh, I need to relearn stuff. Some people who are been Drupal devs for 8-9 years have never written a lick of OOP code, and they're frightened. But you know what? With a little bit of work and a little bit of effort and learning, you're going to get it, and all of that stuff makes every little bit of that worth it.
Well, and you new guys are all set.
And people coming from other it's going to allow people coming from, Laravel, Symfony developers. It's going to, people who are have been using other PHP platforms for years that are object-oriented, they're going to be able to come into Drupal, with minimal amount of training or research and be able to jump right into the mix.
So let me ask you guys collectively, let me ask the group this, is there's always a defining moment in most applications when they hit that critical mainstream. Now, obviously Drupal's huge. That's not the intent of my question. More the intent is this one of those points where you think it crosses, is this a evolutionary point where it hits the final little pieces where it opens it up to a much wider, broader audience and has the opportunity to take it, pardon the cliche, to that next level? Or is this just a standard evolutionary thing?
No,
in your
this
mind?
is
This
drastic
is putting your
change.
foot on the moon.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean,
And some people want to stay on Earth.
yeah, and that's
And hence it got
yeah.
forked into something else, but that's a whole other discussion.
All right,
Yeah.
because you know,
It's a
like-
defining moment.
Yeah, because for me,
Without a doubt.
I'm doing. You guys are seeing me do the Rosetta Stone between what I remember in SharePoint, and with SharePoint it was around 2007, but it was really 2010 when things clicked. I do most of my career is done in virtualization, and for those of you familiar with VMware, it was ESX 3.5. All of a sudden, that 3.5 to 4.0. Once 4.0 came out, everybody, boom, it took off. It hit that magical moment where all those pieces kind of fell in. So it sounds like the
Well,
passion that you're showing right now, and the nods of the head.
Yeah.
We're departing from the CMS. According to Krell, this fellow that Chris keeps quoting, Drupal will now be a RESTful server with a CMS built on top, or
It's a
almost
platform.
anything you want.
Oh,
It's a-
really?
It's no
yeah.
longer
For years,
CMS.
we've been using it as a platform,
Yeah.
calling it a platform,
Yeah.
when
But it was all
it
proprietary.
really wasn't.
It was
like
just a
kind of
very
like-
flexible CMS.
There was a lot of hacking.
really
to get it to be
flexible.
an
We were
actual
Drupal
platform.
developers who made a content management system act like a platform, and now all that's being standardized into being a platform. That's kind of the way I see it.
I don't feel special anymore.
Yeah.
And then you guys
So
schema.org.
We'll figure it out. Schema.org.
Oh yeah, schema. So yeah,
numbers.
schema. Yes, schema.org support
Yeah,
and so on.
it's big. You know, I don't honestly. I don't think that without these changes, and there have been a lot of cries and yells from people in the community fighting this. You know, but if they didn't do this, you know, Drupal would be another platform that in 5 years we'd be talking about. Oh yeah, you're on Drupal. Like, come on,
Yeah,
like.
It's the B
Get with the new stuff, you know, whereas this is going to keep Drupal relevant, this is going to propel Drupal forward, and it's going to bring a lot more of those smart people who
Right.
really know what they're doing into the community and help it go even beyond that.
Yeah. I think from a marketing angle, you know, this keeps Drupal from becoming like a cold fusion. Actually, more like a COBOL.
I can give you an example. You know, so like I have, at a conservative estimate, about a dozen different bespoke applications that constitute our web presence here, written in various iterations of different cold fusion frameworks, running on, at a conservative estimate, 6 different servers.
I feel like we should be sitting in the dark around a campfire.
Yeah.
as we tell this story.
In my mind, that's where I am.
Flashlights
So
pointed at our
about a
chins.
third to half of our website right now runs on a cold fusion based CMS, and then the rest of it on the same server is in cold box framework static pages, and then there's like a whole database stack that drives a press release system, and there's a whole other one that drives a calendar system that doesn't work very well. And so what I need is something that can plausibly present all this stuff and marry it together, all these different applications. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so this is, you know, a company that I work for has some awareness of Drupal as a platform. In the past, my boss has no personal awareness with it, but she's like, it's one of the reasons we hired you. You know, we need you to
Find the
investigate
gold,
this.
yeah.
We need you to find the gold.
Or
We need
polish
to get
the
us off
silver, I don't know.
confusion.
Yeah.
You know, and get us off this dead end path that we're on. And this is a path that I can plausibly present and say, you know, we can get there here.
Yeah. Yeah, my personal take, if you want to see object-oriented examples with Drupal 8, a guy based out of Toronto, Nick Alexander, brilliant guy, super heavy, thick Russian accent. He's awesome, super smart guy. He did a couple of presentations for us, and he kind of works through it, and he built some modules that you can install and see the examples working.
Wow,
So
he's got a stable 8 release.
Nick doesn't
That's
F around. Yeah.
outrageous.
Yeah, in November.
November.
Yeah,
Wow.
this was for our meetup, I think. Yeah. So So yeah, he's on it for sure. You can kind of see what he's got going on there. 274 downloads already, so there's some interest in this for sure. Yeah, I'll make sure we've got links to all the stuff I've talked about. Yeah, but it breaks it down in good detail. You know, there's a little bit of like introduction to object-oriented programming and how it works with, you know, color interface and vehicle and fruit, and, you know, each has its own set of objects and classes, et cetera, et cetera. It's really good. Easy to understand too, which makes it 1,000 times better. Excuse me. So, what was the one point I wanted to say about the marketing push?
Well, for us, we do marketing and SEO as well as development. We do like the full vertical, and we're already seeing, like, for a lot of our clients, we're already seeing 60 to 75 or up % of the traffic's coming from mobile devices and then connected devices like, you know, Roku or smart TV or Xbox or PlayStation. So you have a huge amount of traffic coming from these connected devices. And right now, WordPress, Drupal, all of the CMSs out there, if they offer up content to that, it's always through these little weird, you know, feeds that are getting output and weird APIs that were hacked together.
Badly diminished interface experience.
Exactly. Whereas
The
from
back
the
end and
get-go
front
right
end starts
here,
looking really ugly. Yeah.
yeah, this I mean, built right in. The entire system's already running in a way that lends itself to doing exactly what you need it to do. And Drupal's really ahead of the curve in terms of what else is out there.
One question I got, Retina. Is there any special handling with image styles in like Retina displays? Because I know that was a huge pain point in 7.
Short answer is yes, except, yeah, I'm not sure how exactly to answer that in detail. Maybe.
We can talk after. I mean.
Yeah. So I was going to start making some allusions to the picture module and what's happening there, but yeah.
Okay.
There are things happening with how images are handled in Drupal 8 and even 7 and how all that's working. One thing I want to mention too, I am kind of bouncing around a lot here, is there are things like the stuff I showed with Spark and those UI improvements there and other elements, configuration management. It's been backported to Drupal 7, so you can start using that stuff now in your projects. Yeah.
Well, now that you got that disconnect too, I mean, you could start doing fun things like lazy loading your images and stuff.
Yeah.
A lot easier than you can in Drupal 7. So in terms of doing Retina or pulling different image sizes for mobile devices, that would get a lot easier, I imagine.
Yeah. So the all-important question, when can we start using Drupal 8? So Dries has always said it will be ready when it's ready, which what that really meant was it will be released with 0 critical issues. So now if you look at this chart, blue is major, you know, so be it, but critical issues, so 0. This number just keeps staying the same and goes up a little bit. It's a little out of date at the moment, but
8 pretty much just keeps going on in that little...
Not quite, but sort of. But beta blockers was a critical piece too. So they weren't going to start releasing betas until we were at 0 beta blockers, and whatever the definition of a beta blocker was, that was morphable depending on the circumstances. Like when a DrupalCon was happening and they wanted to do a splashy release. But so this is DrupalCon. They had it down to 0, and then just before DrupalCon was over, they had a couple more issues, and then they got it back to 0, and then the beta was released, which was great. More great for marketing than anything else, really. But it was a good morale booster for the community because V8's been worked on for set your watches back a few millennia. Yeah. So 0 critical issues. So some clever person created DrupalReleaseDate.com, and here's the current estimate based on numbers, not based on actual trajectories of the complexity of an issue and the simplicity of an issue and so on. One issue might take 2 months to work on, and another might be done in a week or a day or 2. And this doesn't really reflect that. So
that's a 6, not a 5.
Yes.
Wow.
But, however, that's still just over a year. And again, like I said, it's based purely on numbers, not on complexity of the numbers and the context of what the numbers mean. But currently, wow, that was 70 when I looked at it just 2 hours ago. So a critical has been wiped out, I guess. But as you can see, the previous chart I showed you, it was hovering around 100, and now we're down to 69 already. So who knows? We might be getting to more progress, as the case may be. We're at least a year out, probably, before we can start building sites. I'm predicting that we will see a release or zero criticals by one of the DrupalCons, because that would be great for marketing, and they'll put some muscle behind making that happen. But that leads me to the next slide, is how can we help? So this link is one example, but where did it go? And I've lost the link.
I bet the guy who created that site has money riding on the date.
There are bets, yeah. Here we go. How to help with Drupal. So this is 70, but it's not updated yet. Anyway, so there are some slightly more updated charts and whatnot here. You can see some numbers happening. There are the drops, the climbs, the drops. So this was January 25th, 73 criticals, but you can see it's actually starting to drop fairly quickly now. That's just in 2 months, so give it another 6 months maybe, depending on what's happening in terms of critical elements and so on. So yeah, in terms of how to help, so there are a few ways to do that. One is just like get involved and start getting into the issue queue and working on things yourself individually. The other is the let me see if they haven't really updated that too much. Oh, here we go. So sprints. 2 weeks ago, week ago, whatever it was, there was a worldwide code sprint. People were primarily working on Drupal 8. Someone did a Drupal 7 issue, I guess, or a 6 or whatever it was. But yeah, so over 50 cities around the world got together and worked on various issues in the issue queue. I should have the link up here still, so I could show it. Well, either way, be nice to have that here. It's just a bit of marketing display. So I forget what the actual number of issues that were worked on, but it was pretty high, and a lot of progress was made just in a single weekend on Drupal 8. But there's also this other way, getting paid to actually work on Drupal. Imagine the odds. So what they've done is, obviously everybody wants Drupal 8 to be released, but we need people to work on Drupal 8. We can work on it individually. We can work on it in globally organized sprints by the Drupal Association. We can do our own individual sprints as Drupal groups, user groups, wherever we are. We don't really have to rely on a global thing to happen. Or there was a Drupal 8 Accelerate Fund created, and all that really means is to try and get Drupal 8 released sooner rather than later. The Drupal Association put together $125,000 of funds to put towards working on more important critical issues to kind of target the big things. So if you want to just like go in and update some documentation, they're probably not going to give you any funding. They're trying to be very smart about how the funds are distributed. Primarily, focusing on critical issues, and they talk about on this page. Go check it out for yourself. But there's details about different ways, different examples of how you can get funding, planning Drupal 8 critical sprints at your Drupal camps, all sorts of different things here, fixing specific issues, et cetera, et cetera. One thing I was asked about when I talked about this in Japan was, so are they just going to give you $5,000 to work on something? No. They'll give you a test fee, which was a stipend of 5 hours, was it? Yeah, sorry, yeah. Initial stipend of $500 for 5 hours will be provided. So that gives you a chance to see if you can do it, and they actually approve of you to continue further work on it.
New Jersey got 7,200.
Way to go, New Jersey. Yeah. So you can apply for grants, etc., and basically you get paid to work on Drupal core, which is great.
That's so cool.
Yeah.